So today's devotion is going to close out our series on the deadly sins. And like I've said a couple times, we call them the seven deadly sins, which is interesting to me, because I'm not really seeing that number in a lot of places. Um, so originally there were eight, and so I'm looking this direction. My apologies for not making eye contact better, but I'm looking at this so I can get this right. Okay, so originally there were eight, and those were the ones that we've gone through the past 8 days. They were gluttony, lust or fornication, avarice or greed, sorrow, despair, despondency, wrath, sloth, vainglory or vanity, pride or hubris. Okay, um, so in AD 590, Pope Gregory the First revised this list to form the more common list. Okay, uh, and he combined the sorrow, despair, despondency with um, with sloth. And I treated them separately because, well, I think those are separate things. Um, and I think it was worth our time to look at them separately. And then he also combined vanity and pride, vanity and hubris, um, which I think that's an easier, I guess, sell for me, is that those two are combined. And you may say, well, that only leaves six. Why do we say seven deadly sins? And he added in envy, um, which I think is very close to greed and avarice. I think that's a very similar conversation. So that's why I went with the list of eight. That's why those are the ones I walked through, because I think, again, as I am not necessarily bound to either list, frankly, as we talked about the seven deadly sins, I thought those would be most relevant for our conversation. And I want to close this conversation by talking about why do we call them the deadly sins. And or capital sins, I guess is the other. And I think it's because they're sins that can lead us in to really dark places. And by really dark places, I mean places without Christ. Okay? Because all of these sins can very easily consume our lives, consume our faith, and draw us away from Christ, which is the most dangerous thing that a sin can do. So if you just go down the list, um, gluttony. Gluttony can lead you to into judgment or lack thereof. It can push you away from the community of the faith. It puts your focus in the wrong place. It can draw you away from the faith. Lust or fornication, that's real easy. When you go down that path, it tears you away from your family, which is one of the best support systems for your faith, or it should be one of the best support systems for your faith. And it just caused rifts in all of these relationships. Avarice, greed, it's the same thing. It can kind of lead you down and create an idol. You're creating an idol. Sorrow, despair, despondency, it draws you away from trusting God. Wrath, it causes rifts in these relationships that can support you in your faith. Sloth, it starts to leak into your devotional life, and you stop spending time in God's Word. You stop spending time in devotion, in prayer. Vanity, pride, hubris, that puts the focus on you instead of on God. So all of these can lead us away from our faith, away from our reliance on God. And that's why I do think that even though we don't necessarily adhere to all of the theology that undergirds the seven deadly sins, I think they're obviously things we should still avoid, because they are dangerous for us, because they can lead us away from faith. And it's that faith that connects us to salvation that comes through Christ. And that's where we're going to close this series on the seven-ish deadly sins. I hope it was helpful for you. I hope it brought you closer in your relationship with Christ. So with that, brothers and sisters, go in peace and serve the Lord. Thanks be to God.